are already long-standing trade and investment partners. We have a long history of trading with our African partners. We have trade and investment framework agreements. We have 11 of them, no, I think 12 now, that cover the majority of sub-Saharan Africa, African countries. We signed one with ECOWAS during the Leader Summit timeframe. So we've already been doing that. We have bilateral investment treaties with Africans. And importantly, we have many, hundreds and hundreds of U.S. companies that do business in Africa, some of which have been there a long time.
My first question is on the overall dynamic between the United States and Africa. How would you deal with the fact that a country like the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is current chair of the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, is not an AGOA beneficiary?
So first of all, I think what you want to really focus on is whether or not we have any kind of trade and investment relationship with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and of course we do. We have U.S. companies that are there on the ground investing. There is still trade that is actively going on between the United States and the DRC. The fact that they are not AGOA eligible is one element of our trade and investment relationship that we probably need to continue to focus on and need to continue to address the concerns that the U.S. government had when it made the DRC ineligible for AGOA. And we, in fact, have had some of those conversations with them, and we believe that we are making progress in addressing some of the outstanding issues that were raised at the time. And I think from the U.S. point of view, in terms of AGOA eligibility writ large, Congress, in its wisdom, put in these criteria from the very beginning. They've been there. They cut across a wide range of issues, whether it's rule of law or market opening, or it's child labor or worker rights. These are all things which have been in AGOA since the very beginning. And what we should focus on is that the vast majority of sub-Saharan African countries that are eligible, would be or could be eligible for AGOA, are in fact eligible. And that countries that have been ineligible at different points have come back into AGOA and are doing well. Cote d'Ivoire would be an example of that. Niger was out for a bit, came back in. Madagascar was out, they're back in. So we fully expect that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is going to address the issues and concerns we have, and we'll be back into AGOA. But in the meantime, we'll continue to trade, we'll continue to have a full relationship with them, and we look forward to the time when AGOA will be one piece of the larger frame of what we do with the DRC.
If you look at what's happening in Africa right now, if you look at what's happening in the United States, the US private sector, the Africa private sector, the dynamic between the different stakeholders, there seems to be a case for an effective AGOA. But what, in your opinion, is driving this? What could be at the heart of an AGOA that is more effective than the AGOA that's currently available to the Africans today?
So I think there are probably several things that drove us. First of all, we know that there have been successes under AGOA over the years. Trade has tripled. Exports of non-oil products to the U.S. under AGOA from the Africans has almost quadrupled. But we also know that that number, even though it increased from 1.2 billion to 4.9 billion in 2013, you think 4.9 billion of non-oil exports across, 40 countries? That seems like we have to also acknowledge that we need to improve and modernize AGOA in ways that hopefully will address some of the utilization issues. But we also came to the conclusion that apart from the specific ways we're recommending to Congress, because this is their baby, they are the ones that will decide what happens with AGOA. But in addition to specific ways that we thought we could improve and modernize AGOA, we really think that AGOA has to be part of a larger trade and development strategy, one that recognizes the supply side constraints on the African side and the things that have kept them from being able to fully utilize AGOA, but not just AGOA, most preference programs, and not just most preference programs, but global trade generally. Africa still accounts for only about 3% of all world trade. So yes, we want AGOA extended. We want it to be a seamless renewal. We'd like it to be a timely renewal. We'd like to modernize it to reflect that the Africa of 2014 is different than the Africa of 2000 when the bill was first passed. But we also recognize that AGOA or preferences alone are not going to be the thing that will transform Africa's engagement in the global economy. There has to be a more concerted way of addressing those supply side constraints that are, and some of the trade barriers that are causing Africa not to be able to participate more fully in the global economy.
So what would you say to those who would like to make the case for AGOA being left as is? I mean, a few years ago, the African ambassadors in Washington, D.C. were just making the case for AGOA being left as it were, the 97.5% product coverage, and all the things as they were, because any change would have caused a bit of a problem. So how do you allay their fears?
Well, I think that the things that we have proposed to Congress are things that, in some cases, they think may make some sense. And if AGOA is going to be extended in the near term, we hope it will be, that this is the time to make some of those improvements to AGOA. So this is the moment and this is the opportunity. And as I said, the kinds of things that we're suggesting are not radical changes of AGOA. The core of AGOA has been there and remains pretty much the same. These are some, I don't know if you'd call them tweaks or whatever, but these are some elements where we think we can make some improvements in the program itself. But again, we are also acknowledging that whatever improvements you make in AGOA as a preference bill, a piece of preference legislation, it has to be linked to other things that both we are doing, that the Africans are doing, and that the general international community, the multilateral development banks and others are doing. We have to work together, I think, more effectively to try to help the Africans take greater advantage of the kinds of market access that they already have. When you look at the number of tariff lines that are not covered, the product lines that are not covered, I think we identified maybe 316 or so products that are not covered. And this is out of, what, maybe 10,000 tariff lines. So for us, the issue is, are there any of them? We certainly don't think that all of them would be added, largely because there are still some sensitivities. These are things that are important. We would not want to jeopardize adding a sensitive product and see AGOA come under, I wouldn't say attack, but people who would have supported it otherwise saying that, oh, wait a minute, now we don't want to support it. So I think there's a trade-off between whatever kinds of changes you can make to AGOA and then getting people to feel comfortable to pass AGOA and give it the kind of extension in terms of length that we think would be reasonable.
So there's been some intense activity in terms of the U.S. International Trade Commission study, the General Accountability Office study on behalf of Congress, basically going towards AGOA, the U.S.-Africa trade dynamic. Are these some of the things that are pushing or compelling the United States to, move towards an effective AGOA?
Yeah, well, Ambassador Froman asked the ITC to do 4 studies as a part of our comprehensive review of AGOA to give us a sense of what has worked, what hasn't worked, where are the areas we might improve, and in that context, potential products being added was a part of that. What I would say is, just from a practical point of view, you can look at some products and you can look at the trading patterns and you can look at the issues affecting those trading patterns, and you might come to a different conclusion. As an example, peanuts. Yes, there are TRQs on peanuts, but the major issue affecting African exports of peanuts, not just to the U.S. but to anyone in the world, including regionally, is aflatoxin. So saying that allowing the peanuts to come in would immediately result in increased exports of peanuts from Africa to the United States is probably not taking accurate account of the major barrier that faces it. So I think you just have to go through product by product and in a sort of rational, objective fashion look at what are the issues, what are the trading patterns, and see whether or not there is a possibility that including those products under AGOA would or could lead to increased African exports. We hope that if Congress decides to add some products that it will be beneficial for the Africans. That's what we would love to see.
Supply side constraints. What is the United States doing in this regard? In terms of Africa, in terms of the U.S.-Africa Trade and Investment Partnership?
So I think basically that a whole range of U.S. programs and initiatives are already addressing some of these supply side constraints. Now, whether there is room and need to do more, obviously we would all like to see and do more. But when you look at Power Africa, for example, and a real focus on developing partnerships with the Africans and private sector, and in some cases even other donor partners, to try to increase the supply of electricity, significantly increase the supply of electricity to Africa. It's a core issue. It affects so many different things, not just trade, but you think about children, having light to read their books and study at night. You think about hospitals that need to be able to run effectively. And for me personally, I think about all the AGOA factories that I've been to that all had backup generators, every single one, and that reduced their competitiveness or increase costs, whichever way you want to put it. But AID is doing a whole range of other things that impact trade and investment as well there. But we have a range of agencies: the Department of Transportation, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, the African Development Foundation, Treasury, Department of Commerce, we have Department of State. We have so many U.S. government agencies that are basically working on a range of issues. We're supporting trade facilitation and the ability of the Africans to move goods across borders more effectively, to reduce the red tape, to thereby reduce the cost, improve efficiency. These are things that we're doing. We have a partnership in East Africa with Trademark East Africa, and they're based in Europe, of course, and working with them to improve the functioning of the ports of Dar and Mombasa, to help to put in computers amongst the EAC countries where the customs officials would be able to talk from one computer to the other, and improve that kind of efficiency. So we just think we're doing a lot already in this space, and we'd like to do more. I think I should say one last thing. On August 4th, right before the Leaders Summit, the African Leaders Summit, President Obama established a trade and investment capacity building steering group. And that steering group will be providing recommendations to President Obama 180 days after it was established. So by about the end of January, we'll be providing recommendations on how we can improve and leverage our trade and investment capacity building programs and initiatives in sub-Saharan Africa. So we're very excited about that as well.
So let me put you on the spot. If you were on the steering committee and you had to put recommendations to President Obama, and you had one silver bullet, one thing that would immediately change Africa, immediately change the way Africa does business with the United States and the way Africa progresses, what would you say that would be, that silver bullet?
So, my wish list would be that we had the capability and the resources essentially to work with, if not all of the AGOA eligible countries, at least, a large majority of them on AGOA and national export strategies. Because I believe that even though the Africans have had AGOA market access now for 14 years, many of them haven't really had professional strategies in depth based on, sort of data-driven studies that show, okay, here are the sectors that actually have the opportunity to be competitive in the U.S. market. This one you like, but truthfully, this one is not going to be competitive. And here's why. This one over here, you haven't even taken a look at, but actually this sector right here has the biggest chance of being competitive in the U.S. market, and for the following reasons. And then here are the steps that you would have to take to realize that.
Dr. Schneidman uses a very good expression. The United States and Africa stand at an inflection point. We could be on the cusp of something really great, or could just keep doing things the way we've been doing them for a very long time. In your opinion, where are we right now? In other words, AGOA expires 2015. Where do we stand today?
So, first of all, we have been working over the course of the comprehensive review of AGOA to come up with what our proposals would be to Congress. We pushed out to start discussing those proposals with them well in advance of the African Leaders Summit, to make sure that they knew the kinds of things we were thinking about, the kinds of proposals we were making for modernizing and updating AGOA. We had excellent discussions with them then. Ambassador Froman was so active on this. He was incredible in terms of the number of meetings that he held, individual meetings, meetings of groups of people. He even had one meeting that, I don't know if one would call it historic, but where he had both members of the House as well as senators from both Republican and Democratic Party, from all of the major committees that are responsible for or interested in African trade, all together at the same time. He's met with the Congressional Black Caucus members on AGOA. So there has been a tremendous amount of work with the administration and Congress on AGOA. But even after the Leaders Summit, there has been continual work going back and forth. I can't tell you how many times and how many meetings we've had. We've lost track. So I think the key is to continue that dialogue, both for us in the administration to continue that dialogue, and for the Africans, whether here or, you know, as ministers come through, as heads of state come through, finance ministers, etc., to continue that dialogue. The last thing I'll say, though, is that once AGOA passes, I do hope that maybe we'll take a moment and take a deep breath and go, phew, it's passed. But I think what will be really important is to very quickly, after it's passed, say, okay, it's passed. Now, what do we need to do so that we can realize the full vision of AGOA going forward? And that's something that I think will be the challenge for all of us.